Manohara Odelia Pinot, that dream was shattered by a cruel reality.
Of course, it is incumbent on us to investigate any matters that have been lodged with us in the police.
Manohara Odelia Pinot, a beautiful model, seemed to be living the Cinderella reality. She got married to a wealthy prince and lived a life of luxury that everyone admired. However, the case was different behind closed doors. Unfortunately, she was trapped in a marriage filled with control and manipulation. The royal life she enjoyed suddenly became her worst nightmare. And soon, everything fell apart. How did this happen? And how did she survive it? Let's find out together. The Kelantan tradition. Along the northeastern corner of Malaysia lies a state called Kelantan. The state is mainly known for its long-standing traditions and cultural heritage. One of the most shocking things about this tradition is the royal marriages that have fascinated both the locals and other outsiders. One of such marriage is the one that took place between Manohara Odelia Pinot, a young Indonesian-American model, and Prince Tengku Muhammad Fakhri Petra, a Kelantanese prince. Kelantan is the cradle of Malay culture, and it preserves all the practices passed down through different generations. Most of the societal norms of this state are influenced by Islamic teachings and Malay customs. Malay customs speak highly of respect for hierarchy, familial ties, and communal harmony. As a result, the people of this land view their marriages as not just a union between two lovebirds, but as a bond between families, which is mainly created to reinforce social structures. This could explain to a great extent why most of their marriages involve the prince marrying women who are much younger than them and who are dedicated to fulfilling their every wish. One thing is specific within the Kelantanese royal family. Every marriage that they get into is mainly to strengthen some political ties or ensure that their royal lineage continues. It is now customary in the land for their royal males to get married to very young brides. To date, their tradition still states that marrying a very young bride is not a crime. However, with recent developments, the legal minimum age for marriage is now 18, except if the parents give their consent and approval for marriage to take place earlier. The people of Kelantan view their women as caretakers of the family. Their wives are expected to uphold their family honor at any cost, always support their husbands, and raise good children. They are trained to be submissive and obey their husbands' commands. However, because of how this tradition is structured, men sometimes feel like they are on top of the world and no longer tend to be nice men. For example, Sultan Muhammad of Kelantan. He was the former 15 Yang di Pertuan Agong of Malaysia. And when the world least expected it, he entered into a very high-profile marriage with Oksana Vojvodina, a Russian beauty queen. Their wedding took place in 2018, and the union began with a very private Islamic ceremony. After the wedding, Oksana was converted to Islam, and a few months later, she gave birth to a son called Tengku Ismail Leon Petra. However, their marriage was short-lived as the Sultan divorced her through a talak tiga, which is known as the most severe and irrevocable form of divorce in Islam. After this divorce, people were shocked to realize that the Sultan did not want to take care of his son. He did not even want to be associated with the mom or the boy. He left the boy totally to be raised by the mom without any financial or emotional support. More shockingly, no court found him guilty of not paying child support. Sultan's reason for doing this was that he said there was no visible reason to confirm that the child was actually his. However, this scandal was nothing compared to what happened between Mano and Tengku. Before we unveil these details, let's know who these two are. Prince Tengku Muhammad Fakhri Petra. Prince Tengku was born on the 7th of April, 1978 in Kota Baru, and he is the third child in a family that has 4 children. His father is Sultan Ismail Petra, and his mother is Raja Perempuan Tengku Anis. He holds a significant position in the Kelantan royal family, and as a result, he has a lot of essential responsibilities. As a result of these responsibilities, Tengku now stands second in line to the throne. The young man was brought up in an environment filled with the privileges and responsibilities that usually come with being a royalty. These responsibilities include adhering to every cultural tradition that the land has. Manohara Odelia Pinot. Before Mano became a princess, she was a brilliant model with many cultural norms woven into her. Fortunately for her, this brought out her beauty and pushed her into the limelight at a very early stage. Mano was born on the 28th of February, 1992 in Jakarta, Indonesia. Her mother, Daisy Fajarina, was from the Bugis ethnic group in Indonesia, which is mostly known for its very rich maritime history. Her father, George Mans, was of French-American descent. So, Mano was a fusion of the Eastern and Western worlds. This made her have a unique view of the world from a very young age. As a child, she spent most of her time in France, discovering herself and her culture. Fortunately, because of the different cultures embodied in Mano, she had a striking beauty that drew many people to herself. It didn't take long before she was picked up by an agent. She had wonderful striking features and a marvelous poise, so it did not really shock her parents when she got into the modeling world because of her beauty and charisma. Her mixed heritage gave her a striking look, and it resonated deeply with the Indonesian fashion industry. Immediately, Mano began to grace most fashion events and photo shoots, and this helped her to build a powerful portfolio that made her future in modeling seem very bright. However, neither Mano nor anyone close to her could have anticipated just how dramatic her life would get. A fateful encounter. Manohara and Prince Fakhri met at a social event when she was still pursuing her modeling career. The first time the prince set his eyes on her, he was drawn in by her beauty and grace. This was all it took for him to develop a deep interest in her. Immediately, he began to pursue the young girl and went through all social circles to establish a connection with her. At first, the prince's need for her attention was both flattering and overwhelming, but they decided that nothing bad could come out of being close to a prince. So they continued. A few days later, the prince proposed to her, sending Mano into a whirlwind of emotions and considerations. Initially, her mother was not okay with the idea. After all, Manohara was just 16 years old and the prince was in his 30s. Also, the woman looked at the cultural and lifestyle differences between them and decided that their marriage would not work. However, the prince was determined to have Mano as his wife, so he persisted during courtship and promised her a life filled with luxury and an elevated social status. Soon, the family began to weaken in their resolve. Unfortunately, this was the first mistake they made. On the 26th of August, 2008, Prince Tengku and Manohara got married in a simple and private ceremony that caught the eye of the public. During the wedding ceremony, Mano was seen smiling, and she looked genuinely happy. It did not take long before she was given the title of Chik Puan Temenggung, marking her official entry into the Kelantan royal family. This union marked the beginning of a very complex chapter in Manohara's life. To many people, it looked like the perfect fairy tale. A beautiful, simple lady getting married to a prince. Life could not be better, but underneath, so much trouble was brooding. It wasn't until later that it was discovered that the fairy tale that was painted was just a disaster. A lavish wedding with hidden turmoil. The wedding between Manohara and Prince Fakhri was a huge spectacle. The prince made sure that the marriage was the epitome of luxury. The ceremony was covered by both the Malaysian and Indonesian media teams, and it portrayed a modern-day fairy tale as the crowd was captivated by the extravagant ceremonies and the dazzling jewelry. As for Mano, she was drawn in by the promise of a life filled with love, respect, and, of course, riches. Unfortunately, this fairy tale did not last for long because just 2 months into the marriage, Manohara began to see the red flags, and people began to notice that she was no longer the happy and excited lady that they had come to know and love. First, Manohara noticed that the 14 years gap between her and the prince that she had believed to be insignificant was very overwhelming. This happened because the prince, who was very charming before, suddenly became extremely controlling, and she began to lose her life. She became suffocated in the marriage, and her new reality was no longer the fairy tale that she had imagined. Ironically, she still managed to put on a smile when she was out in public, so people did not really know that behind closed doors, she was a prisoner. However, only those who looked into her eyes could tell that she was extremely devastated. The prince made sure that the palace was no longer her home. It was her prison. However, Manohara was not the type of girl who would just sit back and watch her life be ruined, so she decided to leave the marriage. At that point, Prince Tengku did not want her to leave at all, so he began to apologize for monitoring and controlling her life. He told her that he would give her access to the outside world again, and she would be able to communicate with her friends and family once more. He promised her that the freedom that she once had as a model will be returned back to her, and she would be able to travel and make independent decisions again. Of course, the young lady did not believe a word that came out of his mouth, so he told her that to prove his words, he would take her and her mother on a family trip. Manohara was overjoyed at this news, and so was her mother. They planned the trip perfectly, unaware that this was just a plan to make Mano feel more comfortable and ease the tension. During this trip, Manohara felt more isolated, and though her mother was there, she could not speak to her freely. Every conversation she had with the woman was monitored, and her movements were limited. If it looked like she was trying to confide in her mother or even seek help, the prince's security would immediately step in. It was very clear to Manohara that the trip was not for her to reconnect with her mother. When she returned from the trip, she complained about it to the prince, but things worsened. The prince completely cut her off from her mother. All her phone calls were monitored, and her outings were dictated by the prince and the royal family. When it first started, Manohara thought if she complied, her obedience would make him trust her a bit, and the controlling nature would reduce, but it didn't work. All of her moves were scrutinized, and if she attempted to resist, she would be met with strong emotional and psychological pressure. One of the things that played a huge role in this was the cultural expectations that the Kelantanese royal family had. They expected their wives to be silent, submissive, and very obedient. They were never allowed to complain, and were to accept everything that was done to them without any complaints. For the wife of a prince to express any form of dissatisfaction was taboo, and it was met with severe consequences. This was very different from a normal marriage, where disagreements could be addressed openly. In this one, Manohara had no say at all in her own life. Control and manipulation. Manohara did not just endure mental mistreatment in that marriage, she had to endure a lot of physical maltreatment. She spoke with so much pain about how she would be injected with tranquilizers anytime she complained, and how she was made to take substances to get pregnant. These substances also made her add weight, which was difficult to get rid of. She discussed the number of nights she spent in agony. The substances that were injected into her would most times make her feel weak and disoriented. This not only made it difficult for her to fight back, but it also made it difficult for her to resist the mistreatment she received. She recounted that, severally, her husband would force himself on her, not caring if she wanted it or not. He would beat her up, inject her with the substances to make her weak, and then have her way with her. When he was done, he would then walk away like he did not do anything. She had thought of escaping several times, but she was already cut off from her family and friends to the point that she had no one to reach out to. It didn't even matter though, because the few times that she spoke about it to anyone else, no one seemed to believe her, and they all said that she did something wrong to the prince. The turning point, a daring escape. After trying for so long to escape, Manohara finally got an opportunity. Her father-in-law, Sultan of Kelantan, was extremely sick, and he had to travel to Singapore for treatment. As a result of how serious the matter was, Prince Fakhri had to travel with him and the entire family. When they got there, they left Manohara behind in the hotel room because they didn't want a chance that the public would see her and she would cause a scene. However, Manohara knew that this was her opportunity to escape without the Malaysian monarchy stopping her. So she immediately thought of a plan and came up with a brilliant one. She went to the elevator of their hotel and immediately deactivated the emergency alarm inside the elevator since she did not have a phone to call the police. The alarm alerted the security personnel, and they arrived immediately. As soon as the police arrived, she explained her situation and begged them for their protection. The Singaporean authorities immediately intervened, and she was able to break free from the prince's security detail. On the 31st of May 2009, Manohara fled from Malaysia and was reunited with her mother. The Indonesian government took the matter very seriously and did not allow the prince to access her. They even restricted any Malaysian officials from entering their land during that period so that Manohara would be protected. Aftermath and legal battles. Once she got her freedom, Manohara did not remain silent because she did not want to allow the royal family to do something like that to another young girl. So, she went to the media and shared her story. She spoke bitterly about the mistreatment she endured and the trauma she had to go through. However, the story had already gone public before she even came out to talk, and her allegations sparked a lot of arguments. Manohara and her mother went on to reveal a lot of shocking truths about the Malaysian royal families. Manohara said, "I have been treated like an animal, and I was just his property. I was always in a room, and whenever he wanted to play with me, he would come in and play with me. It felt like I was just an object. Mistreatment and harassment were a daily routine for me, and he would do it even when I begged him to stop." She also mentioned that the prince had mistreated her before they even got married, but she could not tell anyone. Prince Fakhri, on the other hand, denied all of the accusations and said that she left the royal family on her own accord. The royal family also noted that Manohara and her mother fabricated lies to defame the prince. To retaliate, he filed a defamation lawsuit against them, seeking to discredit all of their accusations. Manohara was called to report to Malaysia for the court hearing. Soon, this legal battle escalated because both Manohara and Prince Fakhri stood firm in their positions. According to the prince's lawsuit, she was to return to Malaysia and repay a debt of $1.8 million, which he claimed she had borrowed from him when they were still married. However, Manohara was not moved. She did not return to Malaysia for any court hearing, nor did she pay the money to the prince because she said she never took any money from him. Later, it was discovered that the prince had carefully calculated this move. If Manohara had in any way returned to Malaysia for the court hearing, she would have risked her freedom and safety, because then the Indonesian government would not have protected her in that land, and she would have been vulnerable to the prince again. Thankfully, Manohara remained in Indonesia, where she was beyond Malaysian jurisdiction, and she continued to speak openly about her experiences. This action of Manohara did not stop the Malaysian High Court from ruling in favor of Prince Fakhri in March 2010. Manohara did not comply with the court's ruling because if she had returned to the royal family, there was a good chance that she would end up dead. Instead, she stayed in Indonesia and received a lot of support. Life after escape. After Manohara escaped from the clutches of the Malaysian monarchy, she tried her best to rebuild her life. The first thing she did was focus on healing from the trauma. When she felt ready to associate with society, she returned to her career. She went back to her agency in the entertainment industry and began to occasionally appear in television interviews and films. Her story was so touching, and it resonated with a lot of women who had experienced such a level of mistreatment, but could not voice out or even fight back. Soon, Mano became an empowerment figure for a lot of women all around the world. However, she did take a step back from the industry. From 2013, she has dedicated herself to a lot of environmental and animal welfare causes. Currently, she works for a publishing company where she indulges in many social activities related to these issues. She still engages in modeling because it is a field she is extremely passionate about. Manohara also talks about her spiritual journey, and in August 2021, she spoke in depth about her religious beliefs, where she revealed to everyone that her mother is a Muslim while her father is a Christian. Prince Tengku, on the other hand, has experienced a resurgence in his royal standing. Back in 2024, he received the honor of being appointed as the Tengku Mahkota of Kelantan, thereby making him a crown prince. This position shows his importance and makes him a valuable asset in the Malaysian royal hierarchy. As a result of this appointment, the title was revoked by his elder brother, Tengku Faiz, who had held that same position for 13 years. However, it has not all been rosy for the prince because some reports state that he was once a fugitive, and he was arrested for being involved in the shooting of his brother's bodyguard, Prince Muhammad Faris Petra. The paths that Manohara and Prince Tengku took over the course of these years are highly contrasting. However, this does highlight how the two respond to past controversies. While Manohara is more focused on personal development and advocacy, Prince Tengku is more focused on restoring his royal status, which shows how personal choices and societal roles can sometimes shape our lives. Manohara's ordeal shines the light on some of the issues that occur within a high-profile family. It shows how most of these influential families try to hide domestic mistreatment because they want to avoid a scandal. However, Manohara is considered to be very brave for speaking up about the challenges that she faced. Her story shows that the picture-perfect fairy tale that we have in our head may, most times, not be the case, and something more devious may be going on underground. Thankfully, Manohara did not allow herself to be bullied into keeping shut. By speaking out, she challenged the silence that surrounds such matters. Currently, the young lady is 32 years old, and she is maintaining a very low profile and focusing on her healing and growth. What do you think? Could there be more to this story than the media told us? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more intriguing stories. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.